Good morning. Hello, hardcore. You are the true dedicated, the true believers. This is the real test of communication's commitment of brilliance and resilience and dedication to science, of being one of the Famelab faithful, or just of not having much to do on a Wednesday morning. So as you heard, I'm Quentin Cooper at QWERTY for tweeting fans, and this is the first of today's 3 Famelab International Tremi-finals. Don't like this word semi-final at all, which is stretching all the way through to 6:30 tonight. That is 9 hours with breaks. But getting a little bit ahead of myself, right? 2 things to check before we properly begin. First, who here at this weirdly early hour already has previous with FCU, the Famelab Cinematic Universe? Who has been to some version of Famelab, some incarnation, and knows what it's about? Let's see hands. Marvellous, marvellous. Most welcome. You are truly the devoted and dedicated. And let's see how many of you are thinking about keeping faith with us all the way through to 6:30. Can I see hands now? Okay, so there's about 25 of those hands. Let's see how many of those are actually there and make it all the way through. Now, I am here for every second of this. One, because as the host, it's really hard not to be. But more importantly, because this is one of my very favourite days of the year. By the time I get to 6:30 tonight, I will have seen 25 bits of scintillating, science-elating, stimulating slivers of irreverence, effervescence, significance and magnificence from some 25 different countries. It is going to be an amazing day. Now, second question, even more importantly, who has just chanced upon this or been dragged here or doesn't really know what Famelab is? Good, you are particularly welcome. Thank you for coming. So, I'm amazed you've made it here this year. So allow me to explain what Famelab is. I've got just a few small equations and graphs for you now. No, you don't need that. It's fine. The essence and essentials are as easy as ABC 1, 2, 3, with a particular emphasis on the 3 part. Every Famelab participant has 3 minutes maximum to get across some aspect of science. That can be a discovery, a development, a problem, a pioneer, a concept, a challenge, an explosion, an epitaph. Well, maybe not the last ones of those. Anything, so long as it conveys something of the how and the wow of science in an appealing, accessible way. If they go over time, they hear this, which is very much the sound of a toy dying, I think, really, as well. And then they get a bit of light grilling from our judges for a couple of minutes, and then we move on to the next. That's it. There's a few fiddly bits. They can't use PowerPoint. They can't use props unless they drag them on stage themselves. A little bit of history. This started at Cheltenham 15 years ago. It's spread across the world like a sort of benign virus. Tens of thousands have taken part. Tens of millions have watched on TVs around the world. NASA and CERN have staged their own versions of this. Presidents and kings and queens have been actively involved, particularly in Spain. The king and queen usually turn up. I'm going to check whether that happened this year. Don't know yet as well. And this year, many hundreds of entrants right round the world have battled through local heats and semi-finals and national finals to earn a place in one of these 3 Tremi-finals. But obviously having all 25 up against each other in one event would be ridiculous. It would be like the Conservative leadership contest. So we've split it up into 3 Tremi finals. And then our 3 judges will choose 3 from each of them to go through to tomorrow night's grand final. And you, the audience, that's you, no, not you, you're one of the Famelabbers, but you, the audience, will also choose one to go through as well. I'll get into the details of how we do that later. Okay, are we all reasonably clear? Marvellous. Then, one thing remains, we should meet the judges. Please welcome zoologist, science communicator working at Oxford and Reading University, TV and online science presenter, and most important of all, winner of Famelab Poland 2014, Joanna Bagniewska. Morning. Research scientist, science communicator, musician, and entertaining entangler of science and art. He's twice won I'm a Scientist, Get Me Out of Here, and been a Famelab finalist, Martin Coe. Morning. Materials researcher and lecturer, now turned head of public engagement at technology company Digital Science, science communicator, broadcaster, and lover of dressing up in weird outfits, Suze Kundu. So, morning, judges. Suze, you are surprisingly soberly dressed today. I think this is good as well. And Suze is wearing a T-shirt. If you can show the T-shirt here. This is what a feminist looks like. I just wanted to suggest that being at a science festival shouldn't be. This is a subset of what a feminist looks like.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, just thought we might vary this. Very early maths joke. So, Suze, no, I think it was in 2017 you went all medieval on us and gave us with great outfits for Once Upon a Lab, which was sort of science as related to classic fairy stories. What are you bringing us for this year's Cheltenham Science Festival?
So this year I had the bizarre privilege of writing an actual paper basically about Captain America for Nature Chemistry on fictional elements, because this year is the International Year of the Periodic Table.
And Captain America, vibranium particularly.
Well, yes, I'm focusing on that. So I'm doing fictional elements, bringing all kinds of things from mithril to vibranium onto the stage. And then later we've got a cabaret of elements as well, where you get to see lots of amazing faces and me.
And you, brilliant. Okay, Martin, same question for you. What are you going to be doing at the Cheltenham Science Festival this year?
This afternoon I'm doing Mothematics with Katie Steckles. I'm the moth, she's the matics. And then next on the Saturday we're doing The Secrets of Light with the Flying Kandinskys.
Oh, wow. But I mean, also, Mothematics is just one of those. As soon as you say Mothematics, you think, I want a ticket to see Mothematics, just because it's called Mothematics. Joanna, I think most of your stuff is already done, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So yesterday we had a stall here from Oxford, from Medical Sciences, from Pediatrics, when we talked about how babies perceive pain. But Medical Sciences are out in the Discover Zone, so if you want to see other departments and the cool things that we do there, please go and take a look.
That was how babies perceive pain. That reached my ears originally as how babies precede pain, which I was thinking, yes, that's true.
In a way, but very small babies, how they perceive pain.
Right, okay.
Yes, not the parental side of things, no.
Okay, so now, on to the basics. So there are no PowerPoint, as we've mentioned, no props. What are you going to be judging our 8 international finalists on?
Oh, well, so I'm glad that you mentioned the 3 being the key number today. The content, clarity, and charisma are our 3 focus points. So we're looking for something that's scientifically accurate, we're looking for something that is very engaging, and something that is clear. Easy, right? Yeah, brilliant.
Good, fine, simple. And Martin, after they've each had their 3 minutes, you get 2 minutes to grill them. Clearly, these are people who are all good because they've got this far.
Grill is a bit of a weighted word, I think.
It is.
It's not quite.
Interrogate? Intimidate? Alarm? Which would you prefer? I only have negative words in my...
You're doing well by yourself. I'll leave it to you. I'm not going to interrupt.
I would imagine these 2 minutes are going to make a big difference, though, in terms of assessing them, because they've all been good enough to get this far. So what sort of things will you be trying to find out in those 2 minutes?
I think we want to see how people react when they're off script. That's an important fact in all forms of science communication.
Yes, that is a good idea, Martin. So in other words, not just that they've memorised something, but they actually can do the backup behind it as well.
Yeah.
And Suze, it's possibly worth pointing out that this is a competition in English, but it is not a competition about speaking English. And quite a lot of the finalists, and I think every one of the ones in this first Tremi-final, English is their second or their third language, so it's perhaps worth stressing this is not part of the judging process.
Oh, absolutely not. All we really want to see is your enthusiasm of your subject, your knowledge of your subject, and just be yourselves and bring all of your background and your culture and everything that makes you to this stage. The language will never be a barrier. It's just science.
Brilliant. And judges, it's going to have a tough job because you only have 5 minutes to reach your decision, so can we give them some preemptive, encouraging applause, please, as well? Now, like I say, we're also going to need an audience winner as well, which I'll leave to yourselves, and I'll give you the details of that later. It's not going to be easy to decide because you're going to watch the national champions of Bangladesh, Cyprus, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Mauritius, Qatar and Romania, but not in that order. That was alphabetical by country, whereas our order is completely random. And first up is our champion from Qatar, which is Ayya Medet. Now, having graduated from the Faculty of Pharmacy at Ain Shams University, Ayya works in the field of pharmacovigilance, which she says is easier to do than to spell. Although nominally working towards her PhD, which Ayya claims is really an abbreviation for pineapple hazelnut drink, which sounds disgusting, Ayya says her time is largely taken up by looking after her 1-year-old and playing Baby Shark. I thought Baby Shark was a song, not a game, but what do I know? Anyway, somewhere between Baby and Baby Shark, Ayya found time to enter and win Famelab Qatar, and now she's here. Never easy going first, especially when it's just gone 10:15 in the morning. So please, some extra warm applause, please, for 2019 Famelab Qatar winner and the first of our Famelab Tremi finalists, Ayya Medet.
Romantically, they locked eyes, and she gave him that look. Inside his mind, oh boy, I forgot to take the garbage out. I left the toilet seat up. What is it, woman? What is it? Yet he dared to ask, what's wrong? And she said, nothing. Well, I don't know about you guys, but if I were him, I'd rather be dead. Ooh, the smile of someone who relates here. Okay. Here's a very interesting study about serotonin, which is a chemical known for happiness and mood stabilization. Males and female subjects were deprived from the precursor of serotonin the day before. And the results? Ta-da! Females' mood drop. And males were expected to feel the same. However, they suffered from impulsive and aggressive behavior. Can you imagine? The same deficiency, but male and female bodies reacted so differently. Maybe we're not alike after all. Now, let's imagine our brains as eggplants, and we're going to zoom in and in until we understand the science behind nothing. Our brainstem here has specialized nerve cells that secrete serotonin, and those nerve cells are connected end to end and communicate unidirectionally from here to here. We're going to zoom the space in between with the areas before and after. You know this fishing game? Fish here symbolizes, okay, another fish, symbolizes serotonin. Normally, serotonin is synthesized in vesicles with structures and secretes serotonin into this space, which then can bind to a pocket or a receptor and stabilizes our mood. After that, serotonin is removed and another serotonin fills the pocket. Then, what is the difference between males and females? Surprisingly, studies have shown that the rate of synthesis of serotonin is 52% more in males. That is more fish in the pond, which guarantees the stabilized and maintained action of serotonin for males and explains why females are more liable to depression, anxiety, and mood swings. Not only that, but also the rate of breakdown of serotonin in females is faster, just as if they had faster fishing rods, which causes mood fluctuations due to poor coverage of serotonin over the receptor around the clock. So, apparently, nothing has many more meanings than ever came to our minds. So, nothing can be a laugh to an inside joke, it can be a way to end a conversation, or declare a defeat, or even a mood disorder. So, sometimes know the difference, because sometimes if you manage to do one thing and ask about the nothing, it could mean everything. Okay, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. I was very impressed by that little fishing game. Is that a follow-on from the Baby Shark?
Yeah. I have a thing for fish, yeah.
So I wonder, with the studies that you mentioned, it's fascinating to see the difference between males and females. Okay. Were they done on people or in laboratory conditions on mice or other models?
Okay.
You know?
the thing is, normally with this precise area, the studies for mice and rats and so forth were in the very primitive forms during the discovery of the drugs and so forth. So it's very kind of old because it's already established that there are many drugs that are used already for the treatment of depression and generally mood disorders. So for example, there are the classes of drugs that are very old, so like tricyclic antidepressants and tetracyclic antidepressants. So we're very past this stage, and we're already in the phase that we have tried on humans, and the clinical trials are already established and so forth. This is not okay. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Ayya, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you've actually nicked part of my question, so good. What I was also wondering was, given that there is such a big difference between men and women, why is that? Do we know yet?
Okay, here's the thing. The reason exactly is not yet fully understood. However, there are many theories that are available, the most probable of which is, for males, we said that the rate of synthesis is 52% more. Okay, so the most probable theory here is that there is a special component or a special transporter or receptor in the brain itself that passes the precursor, which is tryptophan, to the brain. This is why males most likely have a more synthesis rate than females. However, in the females, it also said that the rate of breakdown is faster. So also this, again, the reason is still not fully understood. However, the most probable theory here is that there is some interaction between sexual hormones and I'm so sorry, between sexual hormones and the MAO inhibitor or the process, because when serotonin fills in the receptor, we said there is a reuptake process, and then inside the presynaptic area there is the breakdown or the metabolism of serotonin. So apparently, I guess, according to the last theories, there is a very strong connection between the sexual hormones generally. Maybe they catalyze the MAO inhibitor, the MAO enzymes or so forth. Maybe this is the thing related. Also, there is an interesting part because sometimes...
I think that was it. We have to leave it there for our cutting-edge cut-out champion, Ayya Medet. Yes, you saw technically no answer should be longer than the actual Famelab presentation, which was kind of cunningly did with the last thing. So you get the rough idea then. 3 minutes of them to amaze us. 2 minutes for the judges to try and phase them. We'll throw in some random aeroplane noises and screaming babies as well to try and put them off. And on we go. In this case to Romania. And yes, you're right. That is alphabetically. And Qatar and Romania, the last two countries alphabetically. It's just luck of the draw. It's happened that way. Our Romanian champion is Tudor Suțiu. Tudor is a first-year biochemist. He says he chose to study biochemistry because he's fascinated with the mechanisms that keep him alive, like digestion and respiration, and how to make them even better. Is Tudor a transhumanist or possibly a post-humanist? Can we improve on nature? Should we improve on nature? Is this even what Tudor's going to talk about? My gut tells me it is, but maybe my gut can be improved on. We'll find out in the next 180 seconds from our winner from Romania, Tudor Suțiu.
Your brain is what defines who you are. It's the reason why you can remember your first kiss, and also your first breakup, which, by the way, was totally her fault. It's the reason why you can hear and smell and think and feel sad and so many other wonderful things. But amazing as our brains may be, they have their own shortcomings. And they're painfully slow to adapt to them. And that's why we forget things. We struggle to memorize things, especially speeches. We procrastinate a lot and many other issues. And so, given that, humanity is essentially doing what humanity does best, which is it tries to overcome its own biology. And so, we'll be talking today about brain-to-machine interfaces. Think computer chips, but inside your skull with tiny conductive needles called electrodes poking each of your neurons. Seems a bit uncomfortable, but trust me, you wouldn't feel a thing. Now, the way your brain works is it fires electric signals from neuron to neuron. And in theory, if you could pick up on those signals, record them, and also transmit signals of your own from your chip through the electrodes and then to the neural network, well, congratulations. You've essentially built a bridge between your biology, your brain, and this digital component that you just inserted. And that's actually wonderful. And here's why. Because biology is really hard to program and control, whereas a digital chip is something we can program, we can control, and moreover, we can connect it wirelessly to any other digital device, like, say, a sensor on your door, or your car, or the internet, or another chip inside another person's skull. And there's a plethora of opportunities that opens us up to. However, the state of the technology as it is right now is not quite there yet. But even in this crude form, it has changed people's lives. We've seen people with impaired hearing or sight having these partially restored to them. We've seen paralytics being able to type with only their mind, and many more using no more than about 500 electrodes and also keeping everything wired. Now, in theory, researchers say that if we could get things wireless, and if we could reach about 1 million electrodes, that's where this technology would change the world as we know it. Think directly transmitting thoughts and images to other people's brains without having to use a clunky intermediary of language. Billions of calculations per second. Accessing information on the internet instantly as if you always knew it, and many more. Now, of course, the road until there is long and challenging, but the same can be said about landing a man on the moon. It seems impossible until you achieve it. And with giant tech companies like Google or Facebook already massively investing in this, and Google announcing that in about 20 years we'll have memory implants in our brain that can instantly Google things, I think it's going to be sooner rather than later that our brains are going to become harder, better, faster, stronger. And I think this is such an exciting time to be alive. Thank you very much.
Judah, thank you so much, also for the Daft Punk little drop there. Enjoyed that. So I won't ask the obvious question about Cybermen, which is where I really want to go. I'll ask you after. There was a thing out in the news very recently about people that have extra fingers and how this might actually be kind of able to hold a key to breaking down some of the challenges in this technology at the moment. I don't know, did you read that? And if so, could you tell us a little bit about how that might help?
That's awfully specific. Not really, not that particular thing. I can imagine how that would help us, though, as in, like, it's interesting to see how the brain adapts to, like, you know, having multiple fingers, or even, like, adapting to not having fingers anymore, like, you know, things like the phantom limb syndrome, where it thinks it still has a limb, and it can physically feel pain even though that limb is no longer there. That, I guess you could generally categorize that as neuroplasticity, which is, for one of the fields that we'll have to explore in order for this to be accomplishable, and for two, one of the biggest headaches we're going to have, because neurons change all the time, the voltages at which they communicate changes all the time, and it's going to be a pretty big engineering challenge to keep up with all of that. But I still think it's in the realm of possibility.
Amazing, thank you.
Hi, that was very good. I do love an optimist. And I just wondered whether or not you'd given any thoughts. I mean, you chose to present this in a very optimistic way. Have you given any thoughts to any of the potential downsides of this development?
Right. Well, here's the thing. Virtually any major technological development we've ever created has had its downsides, right? You could argue, for instance, that lots of people die in car accidents, so maybe humanity would have been better off without cars. Or like we see how phones like control our lives and keep us disconnected from each other, or so on and so forth. But I think if you look at the bigger picture, yes, there's going to be downsides, but once this becomes widely available and part of our daily lives, we can have a conversation about how to better regulate it, about how to use it responsibly, about how to minimize the side effects. And the overwhelming amount of benefits we can get off of this, I think, far outweighs everything you can call as a downside. I mean, if you really think about it, including scientific progress, like that's something that would accelerate exponentially if you were able to, like, you know, again, cut the intermediary of language and just directly transmit one idea to another person, or like transmit the image of like whatever invention someone came up to directly to their heads in a much more efficient and much faster way. And not only that, but like build giant networks of hundreds of scientists working together on the same thing. I think all of those things could just like far outweigh any possible downsides this would have.
Thank you.
Okay, sending out all the right signals. Our superhuman champion, Tudor, suits you. And that's suits you, for those who like, remember the fast you, like suits you, sir, as well. Extra fingers. Anne Boleyn supposedly had an extra finger, but we think it might be anti-Catholic propaganda. Nobody's completely sure about that as well. I also love the way, did you like the way that Tudor was using the absolute furthest back on the stage he could possibly be as well? So after Romania, the remainder, and after the Bucharest, the rest. And third, we've someone from Malaysia to amaze you, Hazreen Abdul Rashid. Now, Malaysia are the current reigning Famelab international champions. Khairia Mohammed Hanafiya won last year's final, so Hazreen is hoping to make it 2 in a row. A medical doctor currently nearing the end of his postgrad Masters of Medicine in Psychiatry. Hazreen is on attachment in the psychiatry department of a public hospital in Kuala Lumpur. He says his particular professional interests include addiction and psychodynamic psychotherapy, and his not-so-professional interests include listening to podcasts, watching crime dramas on Netflix, Mindhunter Season 2 coming soon, it's exactly his kind of thing, and also singing loudly in the shower. Although maybe I shouldn't have put the image of him wet and naked in your minds just before he comes on stage. A torrent of applause, please, for our winner from Malaysia, Hazreen Abdul Rashid.
When I was small, there was a boy in my class who was very disruptive. He would run everywhere, he couldn't sit still, he was loud, talkative, sometimes even aggressive. He would pick fights with the other children, and he would complain to his mother when we fought him back. Sometimes his mother would scold him, but sometimes she would tell us to be nicer to him, which is why we kind of hated the mother as well. I was reminded of him when I started seeing children with ADHD, or attention deficit and hyperactive disorder, a condition that is currently affecting more than 100 million children worldwide. Like my old classmate, a lot of them are struggling in schools. Now, you might find it odd that to treat ADHD, sometimes a stimulant drug like Ritalin is used. Stimulants help retain dopamine, which is a type of neurotransmitter or chemical messenger that has become deficient in the brains of ADHD. Neurotransmitters like dopamine help billions of neurons in our brain to talk to each other to complete many specific tasks. In the prefrontal cortex, an area of the brain that controls goal-directed behavior, reduced dopamine causes problems with a function called the working memory. Now, the working memory is different from your long-term memory in the same way your computer RAM, or random access memory, is different from your hard disk drive. Inadequate RAM limits the amount of data that can be processed at any given time. You may have experienced this if you keep too many tabs running in your internet browser and your computer freezes completely, prompting you to stop working to watch cat videos on YouTube instead. Poor working memory in people with ADHD causes them to have problems to maintain focus, and they take longer time to complete many tasks. Reduced dopamine in a deep structure of the brain called the basal ganglia, where we control voluntary movement, will result in excessive motor activities and also high impulsivity, which explains the hyperactive component of ADHD. This is why they get into trouble all the times. Untreated ADHD leads to children who are demotivated and less successful in schools. They struggle with poor focus and impulsivity well into their adulthood. They are also 2 to 3 times more likely to develop addiction as an adult. Sometimes these drugs are used because of the impulsivity, but sometimes they are used to self-medicate these feelings of shame, frustration, and worry. Like my old classmate, who I later found out had developed addiction to methamphetamine, another stimulant drug. He now spends time in and out of prison. Perhaps if we could have recognized and treated his ADHD much earlier, he would have not turned to drugs. Perhaps he could have had a different life and become a different person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. What about the interaction between the diagnosis of ADHD and what you might call normal childhood disruption? I mean, how do you manage the distinction between the two?
Yes, there's always going to be a challenge in recognizing ADHD because some parents might argue that a lot of preschool children are very impulsive, they're very hyperactive. But you can see that usually the symptoms are easily recognized when they are in school, when they start struggling with poor academic performance and their children, they can't really focus and they have a lot of problems in terms of learning. So this is when it's easier for us to recognize ADHD. Another thing is usually the diagnosis is made when the dysfunction happens in more than one setting. For example, not only it happens at home, but it also happens in school. It also happens in public places like restaurants or shops. So I would say that careful diagnosis should be made by experienced clinicians. So that's how we overcome that.
Great, this is a really interesting story. I wonder though, do you think maybe if we restructured the school systems a little bit to maybe not force kids to sit still for multiple hours at a time, it could accommodate some of that behavior and I'm not saying completely remove the need for medication and medical help, but maybe it would reduce that feeling of shame that your friend has had. Have you had any thoughts on that?
I agree with you. Thank you for bringing this up because there's actually a very interesting anecdote that I read somewhere. It's actually not substantiated by any studies or whatsoever, but there are some psychologists who theorizes that the reason why ADHD is so prevalent in our modern society is because kids nowadays, they spend a lot of time on video games and on iPad and on smartphone and things like that, compared to maybe 50 years or even not so long ago when they are all this hyperactive energy and positivity gets channeled into very physical activities like playing outside, running outside. But I think that's one of the modern illnesses that comes with the modern era. I think that's very interesting for bringing it up. But we do actually, if let's say one thing we should empower the education and try to get as many people get educated, especially school teachers, kindergarten teachers. But what it is about spot them early and refer them to the clinicians or psychologists. And try to restructure, I don't know, maybe incorporate more playtime during school instead of focusing too much on academic.
Okay, no attention deficit for our amazing Malaysian champion, Hazreen Abdul Rashid. Next, we have our winner from one of our newer competing Famelab nations, Bangladesh. They joined the competition last year, and their 2019 champion is Abu Salah Mohammed. Abu says he's a simple boy who loves to lose himself in thoughts of black holes or philosophy, or both at the same time, just like any simple boy does. When not losing himself, Abu finds himself being an undergraduate student of naval architecture, devising and developing ingenious and imaginative vehicles. And not just ones for Earth, he says he dreams one day of coming up with an extraterrestrial vehicle that can navigate the methane lakes of Titan. Wow, he's already working on designs. He has designs for Titan, though, but can he be a Titan of Famelab? Bang your hands together for Bangladesh winner Abu Salah Mohammed.
At the beginning of the 20th century, we had built one of the greatest ships of all time, the Titanic. Now, the design of the Titanic was so grand that it was assumed to be practically unsinkable, and in the case of the worst disaster, it would stay afloat for at least 2 whole days before slowly sinking to the bottom. Now, that would be enough time to save everyone, but alas, we know how the tragedy ends. In its maiden voyage, the Titanic came across such a disaster that not in 2 days, but rather in less than mere 3 hours, the ship had sunk. So, out of this whole story, I would like to ask 2 interesting questions. One, how exactly was the Titanic supposed to be unsinkable? And 2, if it really was, why did it sink so easily? Well, to answer that question, we first need to look into a bit of the science behind how ships float in the first place. And to learn that, we can use two simple water bottles. You see, both of these water bottles have the exact same volume, but this one is completely filled with water, whilst this one has nothing but air. And according to Archimedes' principle of buoyancy, as long as this empty water bottle is not as heavy as the one that has the same volume of water, it will not sink in water. So how does that carry on to ships? Well, I know I'm a great artist, thank you, but let's assume this is a ship. So you see, in my magnificent rendering of a ship, this is the part that stays underwater. It's called the hull. And as long as the buoyancy, the water displaced by the hull, is at least equal to the weight of the ship, the buoyancy will keep it afloat. So the genius of the design of the Titanic was that instead of having one continuous hull that, if damaged, would fill it all with water, it had 16 watertight compartments. So say this part got damaged, it would flood up, but the flooding would be contained and not flow to the adjacent compartments, ensuring that with a few compartments damaged, the ship would still remain afloat. But alas, due to some human errors, the detection of the iceberg took a long time, and before the ship could be steered properly, not one, not two, but simultaneously 5 of the compartments were flooded, which made a loss of buoyancy in the front part, buoyancy not lost in the rear end, the ship tipped, stress was created, snapped in half, just like the movie, sank to the bottom. So, in conclusion, I would like to say one thing. The major part of the disaster of the Titanic was due to human errors, but with my speech, I hope that you will be able to appreciate a little bit behind the genius designs that go into these magnificent beasts at sea. And I would also like to conclude with the silver lining that even though the Titanic was a catastrophic, a tragic disaster, we have used the same principles to design hundreds of ships, which has traveled safely millions of miles. And so with that, I would like to put faith in science that even if we make mistakes, science does not, and if used properly, it can change all our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think if James Cameron had been more like you, the movie would have been much more interesting.
High praise.
I wonder, though, because you pointed out different compartments. I've heard that ships that bring cargo from place to place take up ballast water. Mm-hmm. How does that fit into your scheme of empty and full bottles? And where does the ballast water go?
Well, not going into the jargon, let's just say that for safety standards, ships have to maintain a certain level of buoyancy. They can be floating too lightly. So in case you don't have enough cargo to make the weight, let the ship go down, they just fill in ballast water to increase the weight. They have separate tanks for that.
Okay.
To make sure that there is a fixed level of buoyancy for safety issues.
Thank you.
Abu, onek dhanyabad apnar talker jonno. Really enjoyed it. I was just wondering, so I know you're kind of an engineer overall. Was there very sort of a specific reason why the iceberg was able to kind of rip through from a material science perspective? Because obviously these things are made to be quite strong, quite robust. How was this iceberg able to kind of carve through so many of these ballast pockets?
Well, icebergs are not my specialty, but the issue with the iceberg and the ship is, you see, where there's iceberg, the majority of the volume of the iceberg is below water. And so the problem is when the Titanic crew detected the iceberg, they could not, first of all, they delayed. Like if they were, if they could have detected it a lot before the time they actually did.
I feel it's unfair that I'm making you talk about an iceberg. I think what I'm really kind of pointing at is the material science of the ship itself, because obviously it was in quite cold water.
You want to ask how the steel is ruptured so easily?
Thank you.
Yeah. So the steels that we used during the Titanic and the steels that we use now are different. One. And two, I mean, we're improving. Also, I'm not completely a metallurgy specialist. I do have the basic knowledge. So the tensile strengths are, the strengths and the compressive strengths, I mean, they're estimated to be enough for the carriage, but for the passage, for the possible disasters that might come. But the problem with the iceberg is that they had no, during the time they estimated that we have to, turn around, the amount of the iceberg that was, below the water and already closer to the ship was not, estimated quite well. So even though they rerouted, they did not expect so much of the iceberg would make contact with the ship because it was below water, one. And two, we are using a different technology nowadays. We use riveted bolts. We used to use welded ships in the past, and what that changes is if there's a crack in a welded metal, the crack can propagate continuously. But if we're using riveted bolts now, it will stop at the rivet. So, we are making technological progresses to ensure that these don't happen anyway.
Thank goodness.
Thank
you.
That was literally riveting. Can we please thank Abu, Salah, Mohammed? I introduced him by saying he knew about Titan. It turns out he also knows about the Titanic as well. But he couldn't keep the SS Famelab afloat. That was what slightly worried me, the symbolism of breaking up SS Famelab. But we'll move on from that, OK? So we're kind of roughly about halfway across the Atlantic of Tremi Final 1. No icebergs in sight. And we now move from marine dreams to the world's largest landlocked country, which is? OK, second largest? Australia landlocked? Oh, second largest. No guesses? No, that's the largest. It can't be the largest and the second largest. Mongolia, very good. Now, what about number 3? That's the tough one. Do you get this? You get a bonus Famelab prize. Sudan? No, it's got a coast. No, Georgia's just a part of the United States. No, it's a joke. It's fine. No, it is Chad. OK, I'll put you out of your misery. Anyway, I'm throwing in a quick pop quiz because Kazakhstan champion Salima Davlidova is the Famelabber I know least about. I only got a 35-word biography. So if I tell you that Salima loves hula hoops and hand-weaving tapestries depicting key moments in history, that's just a guess. All I can say with certainty is she used to be a project manager in an IT company. Then she moved from Almaty, the old capital, with her family to study medicine at Nazarbayev University in Astana, the new capital, where she's now a third-year medical student. So she's from Astana, and here to astound you, the 2019 Famelab Kazakhstan champion, Salima Davlidova.
Well, I'm actually not really pregnant, so don't worry about me going into labor during this session. But my talk is related to pregnancy, and I'm going to tell you something important to save your next child's life. Well, when I gave birth to my older son, who is sitting here in the second row, glaring somewhere outside, not on his mum, there was a lady, Nurgul, who delivered same day and who became my friend. While we stayed in hospital and shared a room together, she asked several times for doctors, asking them to give her a shot of a drug that she needed as soon as possible because of her rhesus negative status. And I became curious of this situation. So what is rhesus factor status? As you know, there are red blood cells circulating in our blood, and they have certain tags or so-called antigens on their surface. In regards to rhesus factor, you can either have them and be rhesus positive or not have them and be rhesus negative. So let's say I'm rhesus negative woman. It means that I have never been exposed to these antigens and my immune system will consider them as enemies and will try to destroy them upon exposure. If my husband is rhesus positive, then there is a 50% of chance that our child will be rhesus positive too. Normally, during pregnancy, blood between baby and mother does not intermix, but it can do so during giving birth. Thus introducing those rhesus factors into my blood system and activating my immunity to learn how to do the thing of destroying the enemies, right? So first pregnancy can go uncomplicated, but next pregnancy with rhesus-positive baby can have now complications because my immunity will try to destroy all these antigens present in the blood of the baby, leading to complications such as repetitive miscarriages, hemolytic disease of the newborn, or even baby's death. But it is important to know it because this situation can be prevented by injecting rhesus immunoglobulin just right after giving birth. Those immunoglobulins, which they basically, what they do is that they make my immune memory erase that command to destroy these rhesus antigens. approximately 1 in 1,000 births annually have that susceptibility to Rhesus disease. So, can you imagine if every woman knew her Rhesus status, got tested and treated, how many complications could be avoided? If this presentation prevents at least one miscarriage and makes someone a happy mother of several healthy children, then my goal for the talk is accomplished, and that's the end of it. Thank you.
Salima, thank you so much for your talk. So I'm kind of, I've actually genuinely never heard of this disease. Can you tell me a little bit about it and what effectively its sort of purpose is? Because it seems a really odd way of kind of, potentially making a mother miscarriage, future pregnancies and things. What does it do? What's it for?
Right. So you probably heard about organ transplant, but before that they checked blood types, right? And if there is a conflict, then it could be rejected. So similarly, those antigens, they're just like something designing your blood type. There's just more characteristics of the blood group that you have. So if the baby has that, can be a conflict if they're intermixing. So the mother's organism will try to reject this next fetus only if the immunity developed against it. But if there is no conflict, for example, baby is Rhesus negative, then it's fine. Or I'm Rhesus positive, it doesn't matter for me whether baby is positive or negative. It's just this particular situation of the conflict when I'm having immunity against the child.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you very much.
It's really interesting. The immunoglobulin therapy, is that something which is cheap and easy to do? Is it available worldwide, or is it one of those things that tends to separate the rich world out from the poor?
Yeah, I'd say that in developed worlds, it's just something widely spread and used because they introduced it widely in the 90s, so they managed to drop the incidence of the diseases or complications to 1 to 2%. But in developing worlds, many times doctors, because of, obstetricians have too many women to look after, they can skip and miss the situation. So sometimes it's a pure responsibility, like in case with my friend. Doctors actually did not pay much attention in the hospital. It was her who brought this drug with her to the hospital because she was aware and she was trying to raise, can you please give me this shot? So sometimes it has to be your responsibility to take care of it. It can be missed. Yes.
Quentin's coming up there.
Okay.
Okay. So do you know globally which countries kind of do checks routinely and which, like in the case of your friend, leave it in the patient's hands? This is more of a global health question.
Yeah, it's more of global health and overall quality of prenatal care.
Okay.
So yeah, if the country maintains well-developed looking after, and also responsibility. There are many women who come just to give birth and never showed up before, right? So it's also this sort of thing in cultural background.
Okay, there is no immunity to our Kazakh champ, Salima Davlidova. Thank you, Salima. Next, from the large and landlocked Kazakhstan to a country that is over 1,000 miles times smaller and surrounded by Indian Ocean, Mauritius, also the only country in the world to rhyme with delicious. And their new champion, Shrishti Ramsaha, a biosciences research student at the University of Mauritius. Shrishti is also a nature lover. Be kind of ashamed to live in such a kind of flora-abundant place if you weren't a nature lover. And she's keenly involved with Eco-Rays Society, an NGO dedicated to helping protect and conserve Mauritius's many endemic species and other biodiversity. Now, although she says she enjoys interacting with people, Shrishti currently has problems interacting with road surfaces. She's having a hard time learning to skateboard and has already to roller skate and has already sustained multiple fractures, including her nose. But she says she is determined to persist and eventually she will master it. Quitters aren't winners, and you are about to witness the winner of Famelab Mauritius 2019, Mauritius, Shrishti Ramsaha.
Imagine waking up tomorrow, you're combing your hair, and a whole bunch comes in your hand. This severe headache that refuses to go away. This persistent cough that has gripped you for several weeks. Unexplained rashes, or even a strange lump. And you're diagnosed with cancer. What do? How many of you will go for the conventional treatments like chemotherapy that has a lot of side effects? That is the story of 18.1 million people who are diagnosed with cancer every year. And actually, half of them will die from this disease. That's like wiping out the entire population of Cheltenham 83 times. Is there nothing we can do to break this life-taking habit? Mushrooms. Yes, mushrooms are a simpler and effective way of fighting cancer. Several companies across the world are developing anti-cancer formulations, and some of them are actually approved clinical drugs in the treatment of cancer today. Many of you must be familiar with the button mushroom, but how many of you actually recognize this one, the oyster mushroom? And did you know that this mushroom can actually prevent tumor formation? So how they do that? So your normal cell, when it becomes diseased, your body is going to prepare for its removal and programs its death. But when this process fails repeatedly, that leads to tumor formation. When I investigated the anti-cancer effect of these mushrooms in a liver cancer model, I actually saw that they were killing the cancer cells. Now you'll tell me that this is what chemotherapy does, but I would differ with you on that. Chemotherapy is like placing a bomb. You're not only killing the cancer cells, but also affecting the normal ones. But these mushrooms are very specific. They target only the bad guys. And like James Bond, it's a clean kill, leaving behind no evidence of inflammation. So you'll ask me, what's the magic molecule in this mushroom? That's ergothioneine. It's an amino acid, and along with a cocktail of other compounds, make these mushrooms strong anti-cancer agents. 30 to 50% of cancers can be prevented by simply modifying your diet and lifestyle. But how many of us adopt a preventive approach? Australian scientists have shown that breast cancer patients consuming mushroom twice a day prevented the recurrence of their cancers. The solution is right under our nose, and yet we wait for the disease to knock on our doors. So, won't be static. Let's eat mushroom and prevent cancer from becoming a habit. Thank you so much. Sorry, I forgot the mic. I have to give the mic. Yeah.
You or me?
I've got you.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. So what stage is this at? Are you still studying the effect of these compounds in models, in cell cultures, in small mammals? Where are we?
Yeah, actually, so we've done a thorough study from cell cultures to animal models. And now it's at the stage where we are planning to go for a first preclinical trial. And what's interesting is I've realized that after so long of doing research that before this product gets on the market, that takes a lot of time. So for me, the key message is if you can prevent, if 30 to 50% cancers are preventable just by modifying your diet and lifestyle, I think that's where we start. This is something which is going to come along, I'm sure. But that's where we want to act now.
Thank you. I wonder, does it matter how the mushroom is processed? So does it have to be raw or cooked, or how do you serve it to your patients potentially?
Okay, so these mushrooms actually very high water content, and we are also doing a parallel study. We are studying the effects of cooking methods on these mushrooms and their potential anti-cancer activity. But just to tell you that even if you're cooking the mushrooms, one of the bioactive compounds like the amino acid and the beta-glucans, that's a hot water extraction, so you're not damaging the compound in any way.
Can I have another one, or do you?
Yeah. Oh, do you want to? Oh,
yeah,
go on.
I've got another one. Sorry. So I wonder, how do you go about picking that mushroom? So why oyster mushroom? Why not porcini? Other thing?
That's a question I really wanted you to ask. Thank you so much.
Yay!
Why oyster mushroom? When I looked up in UK, do you know that this mushroom is available in the winter strain and the summer strain? So there's no reason why you wouldn't eat it, except if you're allergic. So the advantage with this one is they have started preparing bags. So you can actually have that mushroom at your own place. It has all the ingredients for it to grow, and you harvest up to 1 kilogram from that. And it doesn't need much, you just need to keep it in a very cool and damp place. That's the reason for choosing oyster mushrooms.
Just one, so you're making me hungry now, sorry. So you mentioned liver cancer specifically.
Yeah.
So could this work for other types of cancer, or would we just need a very widely varied diet to kind of ward off all cancers potentially?
All right. The reason for choosing liver cancer is because it's one of the organs of your body that is under insult almost every day, detoxifying it. So that was the reason for choosing liver cancer. But also studies across the world have also shown that these mushrooms are effective in other types of cancers like breast, colon, prostate. So it's amazing. They're like miniature pharmaceutical factories.
Yeah.
Okay, pearls of wisdom from oyster mushrooms from our delicious, nutritious Mauritius champignon, Shrishti Ramsaha. Champignon, get it? Thank you. Right, now, penultimately, come to the country which consistently has the largest entry for Famelab. Hundreds and hundreds apply. The first auditions and heats apparently last days, and that is Egypt. All of which means that our new Egyptian champion, Nada Al-Sayed Ahmed, has already been through more than most to make it this far. Nada is a PhD student in microbiology, where she studies how bacteria are fighting back ever more strongly against antibiotics. And she's also a successful Arabic voiceover actor. So if you go and watch Avengers Endgame in Cairo, then you know Black Widow, that could be Nada. I mean, I haven't actually checked, but it could be. She says her drive to learn more about the universe comes from within, but even more from without, because she's mum to 2 curious kids who keep her busy searching for answers. And in the next 3 minutes, she's got some of those answers for us. Nada may mean nothing in Spanish, but it means a lot more in Famelab. Please welcome our Egyptian champion, Nada Al-Sayed Ahmed.
In 1979, Anna Marie was found dead at her apartment. Nothing at the crime scene could lead to the murderer, and the case went cold. However, the lead investigator kept samples from the victim's fingernails, hoping that they hold a solution to the mystery. And he was ahead of his time, because 6 years later, a scientist named Karimoulis invented what we can call a genetic copying machine. Polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, is a lab technique that we can use to make so many copies of a DNA. DNA is a really long, double-stranded molecule that's present in almost every living cell. It's composed of 4 units repeated along the DNA with a certain order specific to each one of us. Those 4 units are called A, T, G, and C. But what's really interesting about the DNA is that if we conceal one half of it, we can guess what's in there using the other half. That's because along the DNA, a unit A on one side will always be holding hands with a unit T on the other side, while a unit G will always be holding hands with a unit C. So during PCR, we will separate the sides and use one of them as a template to build the other. But we need to hire a worker called polymerase that's going to read the DNA units one by one, and whenever it finds an A, it's going to add its best friend, a T. And when it reads a G, it's adding a C, until we have a complete double-sided sequence. What just happened to the first half of DNA will exactly happen to the second half. So we started with 1 DNA, and now we have 2. If we repeat the same steps, the 2 will be 4. And again, the 4 will be 8. Excellent. And after 30 times of repeating, the 1 copy of DNA that we couldn't see before will be millions of copies, a number that's huge enough to be seen by the naked eye. So with PCR, a tiny amount of DNA hidden under a victim's fingernails could be amplified so many times and could lead to the murderer. But what's more, it can be used by a paleontologist to discover a tiny amount of DNA that's thousands of years old, or by a physician to detect a viral DNA circulating in a patient's body. Actually, PCR was magnificent. That its inventor, Karimolos, received a Nobel Prize in chemistry, and a whole new era has begun. It's the post-PCR era. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder if, do we give extra points for glitter or not?
Yes.
I wonder, how do you know that it's the right bit of DNA? Because you said you check under the fingernails and you scrape a little bit off and you hope for the best, but it could be the victim's DNA, or it could be, you know, I don't know, she was cutting a piece of meat for dinner or something. How do you know that you got the right bit?
Actually, that's a great question. In our DNA, there are like certain regions, our DNA called short tandem repeats. Those are like notes in a song that are repeated in a certain number that is specific to each one of us. So when we, after we're doing PCR, we cut the DNA of like this suspect or found under the fingernails, and we cut it into pieces and searching for those like short tandem repeats and make like a pattern. I was ready for this question. And you get like a pattern for every person. I hope that you can see actually the picture. So this is the pattern of the victim, and this is the pattern found under her fingernails, and each one of the suspect has his own pattern. So we can compare until we find the perfect match.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm a big fan of your glittery DNA as well. I know. God, you should do wedding bunting. My question. So this was kind of looking at forensics in particular.
Yes.
Is this how you use PCR in your research, or what are you looking at?
Well, in my research, I search for antimicrobial resistant bacteria. Yes, the bacteria that can like fight back against antibiotics are not affected anymore. And I search in their DNA for genes, like certain parts of their DNA that give them the ability to fight back. You know, like they are not affected anymore. So I search using PCR. I amplify those parts until I can like actually see them in the lab and know that they are there.
That's amazing. I used to work on antimicrobial coating, so that's wow, cool.
Another one?
One more little one.
So, in your own work, is anything like what you are doing? Would that have been possible without this technological development?
Yes, in microbiology, we have routine lab tests that are like really old, but they are still working and they are like a gold standard in our research. But sometimes bacteria cannot actually be grown in labs, so we have to use PCR to actually find that they are there. Right. So it's a method of choice for detecting many of the pathogens. Okay.
Okay, there is no denial or DNA that there is our Egypt champion, Nada Al-Sayed Ahmed. And Sue's content, clarity, charisma, yes, glitter, not so much. It's not a negative factor, but you shouldn't be going, most glittery wins. By the way, just in case you're worrying, that was a classic demonstration of the fact that the 3 minutes starts when the speaking starts. So that's why you can move around the props and things like that before we begin. Right, finally, we head some 500 kilometers north and a bit east of Egypt to Cyprus and the victor over Cypriot compatriots Eli Siama. As well as having what is the shortest name across all 3 international tremi-finals, and one of my favourite anagrams, Eli Siama, is Salami Lai. She is a paediatrician and lactation consultant. I don't think I've ever met a lactation consultant before, but I'm not going to milk it. Ellie has 1 dog, 3 children, and 4 parrots, and describes herself as mother to them all. Her life philosophy is to look at everything through the lens of science, and she only believes in scientific evidence, which Ellie says she means those who claim the earth is flat or that vaccines cause autism are no friends of hers. If you do have such views, what the heck are you doing in a Famelab Tremi final? But please keep them under your hat for the next 3 minutes as we get friendly with our first Tremi finalist, here from Cyprus to wow us, Ellie Siama.
So, with all the technological advancements in research, why haven't we been able to clone humans yet? Do we really need men for reproductive purposes? The answer lies in what is called genomic imprinting. This is a process where in the sperm and in the egg, in the germline, some genes are marked, are imprinted, and thus not expressed. This happens in a small percentage of our genes, and it's a dynamic process. That means that even in a next generation, those genes might be expressed. There is a theory behind it, that what is called the parental conflict hypothesis. It is believed that father's genes are more interested in the survival of the offspring, even at the expense of the mother, while maternal genes are more interested in her own survival and the nourishment of the current and subsequent litters. If we imagine them as on and off switches, you can imagine that no one wants to play with those switches in a complex species like ours. Thus, makes cloning a little bit of a complicated process and unpredictable process. And I can give you some examples of what happens if something in this process goes wrong. We know there are 2 diseases, completely different clinical diseases. One is called Angelman syndrome, and the other is called Prader-Willi syndrome. And those diseases are caused by the exact same mutation in the exact same gene. One is of paternal origin, the other is of maternal origin, and thus the opposite genes are expressed. And they have totally different pictures. In Prader-Willi, we have obesity, hypogonadism, and low IQ. In Angelman, we have a smiling face and tremors and epilepsy. And another example is what is called complete mole pregnancy. There, an empty egg, obviously for something went wrong, and is fertilized either by 2 sperms or by a sperm with double the genetic material. And that makes the sequence and the number of the genes normal, but their expression is not normal because they're all of paternal origin. It seems that the genes of the fathers are usually growth-promoting genes, while mothers' imprinted genes are usually growth restriction genes. And we need both to achieve balance. That makes men equally necessary for reproductive purposes.
Ellie, thank you so much. You captured my imagination with the 4 words, do we need men? Yeah. Anyway, so I was kind of wondering, we've talked about sort of two-parent gene sources. Can you tell us a little bit about the so-called 3-parent families and stuff and things like mitochondria? Does this fall within your realm?
Okay, I can tell you a little bit about this. There is memory in our genes of the origin of where we get them from. The 3-parent thing is quite a little different because you might have there's a Mendelian inheritance where the usual what we know, for example, thalassemia, that you get one allele from each parent, and then you combine and you get a disease or some expression, or the genes are expressed. There is this kind of inheritance I mentioned, where those genes are repeated, and then there's another inheritance through our mitochondria, which are in the egg, in the plasma feed, and this has more to do with 3-person inheritance.
Mm-hmm. So there's no sort of, there wouldn't be the same kind of conflict then potentially that you would get if it was sort of the same, sort of, because it's more varied?
They mostly influence the energy of the cells.
Yeah. The mitochondria themselves?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is there anything that we can learn about human reproduction from animals which where there is no male involved in reproduction. Like there are several parthenogenetic species where they have an all-female line. Is there something that we can learn from studying those species which will help us?
Usually, the reason is that they do not have much imprinting. In more complex species like ours, it involves more genes. And the less imprinting we have, the more easy it is to manipulate, and that we can learn. But the thing is, that's the reason we don't have cloning, because in complex species, it's more difficult to manipulate adult cells, and they're more prone to errors. And you cannot take really immature cells, because then you don't have that imprinting. And then they're more prone to errors as well.
Right.
I was thinking how much more complex we are than sheep, and thinking as a zoologist, are we really that much more complex than sheep? Or is it the ethical question of the person that will be grown, so to say, in the lab? Is that what you're worried about?
No, there are also ethical questions, obviously, but usually even in the more, and if we think the most unethical thing, there will be still one scientist in the whole world that would likely work on it. So I don't think that's what stops us. What stops us is that, yes, we are more complex than Dolly, but that's the only organism that we know that reached adulthood. All the others even die before the implantation phase.
Right.
Okay, beautifully expressed gene genius from our Cyprus champ, Ellie Siama. And if you take nothing else away from this Famelab, please remember her conclusion, yes, we do need men. I mean, that's very important. So that is all 8 of our first Tremi finalists. Can we please thank them collectively for all 8 from Romania, Qatar, Mauritius, Malaysia, Kazakhstan, Egypt, Cyprus, Bangladesh. They have been famelabulous, but having had entertainment and enlightenment, now comes judgment, and for most, being out on the pavement. And it's tough, I know, especially as everyone, as you've seen this morning, well, apart from the judges and me, are proven winners. They've all made it through auditions and heats and their own national finals, but there is only room for the judges to select 3 of them to get through to the final, and they'll need to do it speedily, because time is tighter than my girdle. So Joanna Bagniewska, Sus Kundu, Martin Koth, go and be decisive, go and do it quick, and can we send them on the way with some applause, please? Now, while they are away picking 3 from 8, you have the slightly harder task of picking 1 from the 8 to go through to be as our audience vote winner. So this, remember, is a vote for a place in the Famelab International Final tomorrow, not to replace Theresa May as the Conservative leader. I don't want to mistake there. Now, if your choice is the same as one of the judges, so be it. If it is different from the judges, so be it. If you can't vote because you don't have a mobile or other internet disentangled advice, so sorry. And if you can't be bothered to vote, that is so disappointing. So here is what you do. First, get out said device if you have one, something that connects to the internet. If you've got multiple devices, and this being a Cheltenham audience, you're the kind of people who might, please just stick with one. Now, the network here is CF voting. You can just do this through 3G or 4G, but if you want to, the network is CF voting, and the password is Science 2019. Then go to the Vox Vote website, which is, oh yes, I'm glad it's up there on the screen, live.voxvote.com. Just to give you a minute to do that, can we squeeze all 8 finalists back on stage so we can remember who is who? And if you can somehow surf and clap them on stage at the same time, can we please welcome back our Qatar winner, Ayya Medet, Romania winner, Tudor Suits You, all the ways here from Malaysia, Hazrin Abdul Rashid. That's it, come on, get them on stage. Bang up to date from Bangladesh, Abu Salam Mohammed, Kazakh champ Salima Davlidova, Mauritian rhetorician with ambition, Shrishti Ramsaha, Egyptian champion, Nada Al-Sayed Ahmed, and back, after just a couple of seconds, Cypriot but no idiot, Ellie Siama. That's fine. Have you all made it to the Vox Vote site okay? Mumble, a kind of vague affirmative mumble. That's good, that's great. So now into this pin, 47814. Having the Famelabbers on stage serves 2 purposes. 1, it reminds you who's who, and 2, it stops them frantically voting for themselves as well. Okay? So click on whoever you think most deserves a place in the final, okay? And then press vote at the bottom of the page. Please don't vote on the basis of country or cuteness or close relatives or could imagine they might be nice or you might like to share a kayak with them. Just vote on the basis of who gave the best Famelab presentation and dealt best with the judges' questions in your opinion. Voting is completely anonymous. So even if you are a blood relative, a close friend, a national representative, they'll never know if you didn't vote for them. So I'm going to give you all 1 minute to vote. If the Famelabers, it's your last chance to encourage people. You can yell, you can scream, you can smile, you can just be cute. This is good if the number of cameras implies that people have already voted. So is this all going through fine? That is marvellous. Okay, another few seconds. I'll leave it open for a couple of minutes while we give you a little something to watch now. So we've got a little treat for you. It's a rather nice Famelab video. So Famelabers, having all come onto the stage, you can, if you want, stay there and duck down, or you can go back off the stage and watch the video. But once you're all off, we're just going to roll a short Famelab video, and there are going to be different videos in all 3 of the Famelab Tremi finals. So when you're ready, roll video, and by the time it's over, the judges should be back.
Famelab has really helped me grasp the idea of clarity and how to really break things down so that anyone without any prior knowledge about that subject can appreciate it.
So science communication is a very simple thing, yet quite difficult to perform, which is to communicate science to the general public. That means we need to take what seems to be so difficult about science, which actually is difficult, and simplify it to the general public, but with correctness. Of course, we cannot make mistakes.
So the 3 C's for Famelab were clarity, content, and charisma. They taught me that you have to be clear in the message. And the more clear you are, the more people will understand what you're saying. If you go too fast, no one understands.
If I was to head up on stage and talk about microbiology words like streptococcus or even respiratory vapor, I'm sure that the crowd would have absolutely no idea. But if I use the words bacteria and whale snot, it's a lot more clear.
Famelab has helped me develop the content in my research because you think you know everything about your research until you walk onto the Famelab stage and get questions from the judges and different questions from people after your presentation that you would never thought to think about.
I really believe that in science communications, when you're explaining science to normal people, you have to add some flavor so that people really stick to what you're going to say to them.
I mean, don't be scared to talk. Talking is nice and people listening to you. You have like, especially in Famelab, you have 3 minutes that everybody pays so much attention to you, so it's your chance to give out what you know, and charisma is the way that you will grab their attention so they will, you know, listen to you. And my tips is just don't be afraid. Nobody will do anything bad, so yeah, just be confident.
Woo! Round of applause for the video. Like I say, there should be more where that came from for the other 2 Tremi finals. But right, first of all, time to get down to decisions. Number 1, can we please welcome back our judges? Please welcome back Suze and Martin and Joanna. Thank you for being speedy. Now, judges, I hope you've got 3 names for us, and those 3 names are all roughly correlated with the people we've just seen. Now, but before we reveal them, just how tricky, how difficult, it's a tough thing to do. They were all brilliant, so how hard was it?
Oh, I mean, if you look under the makeup, bruises, hair pulled out, we fought for all of you. You were all brilliant, and it was really difficult to choose. There were so many amazing talks. Such good use of props as well. I can't believe it.
Even one of them had a prop in anticipation of your question. That was super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But we've been writing down marks, and I haven't got more than 5 marks between the top one and the bottom one.
Yeah.
So that's amazing,
Okay.
amazingly close.
Now, at some point, I need to be handed an envelope with the name of the audience vote winner, just a reminder, because otherwise we're just going to have to guess. So that's a key, crucial detail. Maybe the audience vote is still being computed. I don't know. Farha, is it ready? It's ready. Good. You see, that was seamlessly done, I thought. So I'm going to hold this back to find out if the audience vote is in concordance with yours. Now, due to the linear nature of time, they can't give out all three names at the same time because you wouldn't hear them if they shouted them out. So there is no order here. These are three equal Famelab International finalists. Deliver the information in whichever way you see fit, and then maybe you could come up to the stage and be bask in glory.
Okay, we're going to do one each.
Okay, so our first choice, first person we've chosen today.
First among the equals.
First one that I will be announcing. There we go. Yes, they're all equal. My presentation is of a person that has given an extremely clear talk with a very simple and to the point use of props. I was very impressed by that. Telling a well-known story from a completely different viewpoint, and Famelab is about sink or swim, but that person definitely swam because it's Abu from Bangladesh. Well done.
Come on up. Brilliant, congratulations. You now have something to do tomorrow night. Okay,
yeah.
Number two. Not of two, but the second,
Yep.
you know.
The second first, yeah.
So I'm going to be announcing the second of the top three. This person talked about a really interesting topic in a really detailed manner. I think they explained the technique really well, but they were also able to expand on this in the context of their own research, which sounds fascinating. And whatever Quentin says, I am not swayed by glitter. This is not the reason that this person won, but I'm really thrilled to say the second person is Nada from Egypt. So thank you.
I like the way you got suede and glitter into that.
And lastly, but only in the, strictly temporal sense, a very clear, very bouncy, very upbeat presentation with a very simple message. And just as Susie's not swayed by glitter, I'm also not swayed by being a neuromorphic engineer. It's Tudor from Romania.
Okay, huge congratulations to those chosen, commiserations to those frozen out, but this envelope could contain a fourth to join them, or it could be somebody whose name is already there. Hang on, it's folded cleverly. And it is... I don't see why not.
Okay, so...
It's an unusual request, but it's...
Awesome, why not?
We like to go with the flow.
It works, right? So, right. Wonderful round of applause for the audience choice winner and the fourth person joining us in the finals, represented from Malaysia, Mohammed Hazin bin Abdul Rashid. I hope I got that right.
Brilliant. So this maintains a tradition from last year where somehow the audience vote for all three Tremi finals differed from the judges, which I don't know what it says about audiences and I don't know what it says about judges, but it means more work and more fun for me on Thursday night as well. So that is it. Can we please thank our judges, Martin Koth, Joanna Magniewska and Suze Kundu.
Well done to you guys.
To all fine, fantastic Famelab Tremi finalists. Now, their work is not completely done. These four have got things to do tomorrow night, but some of the other Tremi finalists you'll be able to see free of charge on the Apollo stage. That's the brand new Cheltenham Science Festival Apollo stage. Tomorrow, 17:45 to 18:30, or 5:45 to 6:30 in old money, or 6:45 to 19:30. There's going to be some Famelab alumni, as well as some of this year's non-getting into the final Tremi finalists. That's the benign way of putting it. We don't want to say losers. Oops. Anyway, they'll be there. They'll be there on the stage tomorrow as well, so you get a chance to come in. Thank you all for coming. 10 a.m. is not an ideal time for dazzling science communication, but I think we've shown you can be brilliant in science at any time of day at all. Part 2 is at 1:15, when we'll have 8 more bits of brilliance from 8 more national champions. Thanks to everyone behind the stage who's made it happen, to the British Council for supporting this, to our judges, and most of all to our 8 Famelabulous Tremi finalists. Thank you for coming. Thank them one more time. Hope to see you 1:15.